morning. I am Cal Frenish. If there are people signed in that don't know that, haven't joined us before, our service is coming to you live from the Sheridan Unitarian Universalist Fellowship Hall. And I am joined here today by Ian, who is making the technology for this service happen. I should say he is joined by me because he and Grace have been here pretty much every Sunday for a long time since we had to suspend services, and I really, really appreciate that. Thank you, Ian and Grace, if you're listening. We will also have a Zoom gathering following our hour-long service for further discussion and fellowship, and that's hosted by Sue Roberts. And I thank you, Sue, as well. And also Victor Asher, who was helping to organize the order of service and got that online for us to look at.
And Victor would also like to mention that they are having their weekly meditation group again. It's outdoors at Victor and Janet's house. And I think you should be able to find that address. I don't have it on the top of my head, but it should be in the order in the email.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. And I'll start by asking if anyone has announcements for the rest of the group today. If you do, please submit those by chat or by text. Do you have a preference, Ian, as far as what might be easiest?
I'll see it all come in.
Okay. So again, the links should be on your screen with the order of service. So if you're watching now, those should be available to you, and we will mention those announcements as they come in. Our opening reading today is a poem written several decades ago by a college freshman on the topic of breaking out of our two-dimensional lives, and it's called Blackboard. Solitary, interwoven chalk lives on an endless board. Time's a hasty child's eraser. Hard-pressed, we grate and trace more deeply. On occasion we pray, oh, to transcend, to quit the board, and trailless, drift at will, my Lord. An idle dream, but pleasant. The dust tray is filling. And on that cheery existential note, let's have some morning music, please. All right, great. What we would like to do now is our chalice lighting. And we light this chalice for the web of life which sustains us, for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being, for the earth, the sky, above and below, and for our Mother Earth, and for the mystery. We would invite you to send joys or sorrows, either online or to Ian, actually both. I'll light the chalice and we'll begin. There we go. I'll start with a sadness and a recognition. The last couple of weeks I've lost a friend and my younger cousin to illness, and just remembering them. One was in Texas and one lived and worked on a ranch near the Montana border. Both really good people, and just we'll miss them. My cousin and I were buddies, and he passed away in his sleep, and the other person passed away in an accident. But just thinking about them.
I've got a concern that Bill Bradshaw has. He says, please light a candle for my friend and coworker Steve, who was in a serious car accident on Thursday. He was life flighted to Billings. Keep him and his family in your hearts. We also have a candle of birthday wishes for Bruce Andrews. Happy birthday, Bruce. And also another candle, a joy for another birthday. Gage is turning 12.
Wow.
What a big joy. And also, Cameo seconds that candle for Steve. Susie Clinch is sending a text for a candle, both a joy and a concern for all those doing the hard work of recognizing and opposing oppression. Sue Roberts has a joy for Maya returning safely home from Virginia. Yay! That's great news. I would like to light a candle, if you could light one in my stead, just for the incredible march and protest that took place on Friday evening. There were more than 350 people when we left the library, and I think the press estimated that there were closer to 500 people by the time we got to the courthouse. It was just tremendous. And I think if little old Sheridan, Wyoming can show that sort of support, we know that we're living in a time of change. So that was really encouraging and quite a thing to be a part of.
I agree, and I would add to that I've heard comments from a really wide variety of people that were really pleased and or surprised and or made thoughtful by that event. So
yeah, there certainly was not just one type of person there at that protest. It was everybody. So I'm looking for more Grace also would like us to light a candle, a joy for peaceful protests across the nation. Yeah. And, okay. And if there are any announcements that come in through the course of the service, I'll make sure to do my best to announce those at the end. Do we have one slot left for joys and concerns?
We have one slot left.
Okay. Left unspoken, but held in our hearts. All right.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I kind of wish you could all see Ian, because he's sitting here in a swivel chair because he's moving back and forth, managing a couple of keyboards of speakers, surrounded by cords, earphones around his neck. It's pretty impressive. It's really, really good that Ian is doing that and not me. We'd be having an hour of silent service, which would be okay too. That would be good too. Thank you for those joys and concerns. What we'll do now is I'll do a brief reading, and we'll follow that reading by a moment of silence, and then we will sing Spirit of Life. Open up to what you experience at the exact instant you unexpectedly catch sight of and recognize a friend that you haven't seen for a while. Stay with that instant of recognition before waving, before even thinking about it, before greeting, just that initial flood of recognition, comfort, connection, joy. Savor, savor, savor that brief, elemental, transcendent sense of oneness.
To sing? No, you're good. Okay. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Okay, thanks. And I'll mention before I start with the presentation that you may find that I'm not sure when the mic is on and when the mic is off. So if I say something like, wow, that was weird, just assume that it was part of the presentation. Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Our theme last month was mystery, with several mentions of the close relationship to this month's theme of transcendence and of our first UU tradition, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces that create and uphold life. Transcendence, setting aside a wealth of ponderous definitions, may be seen as experiencing something more or greater or deeper in a way that increases our spiritual awareness. Returning for a moment to our first UU tradition, three things always catch my eye and my heart. The first two words, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder. It's not just theorizing or casual conversation. It's engagement of our senses in the moment. It's direct experience. And second, that direct experience moves us. It moves us to a renewal of the spirit. It doesn't just kind of make us think. We move. We are activated. We take action. And finally, we're moved to renewal of the spirit and openness to the forces that create and uphold life. That's where we're going, to create and uphold a life, not a talking point, not a good market strategy, but the direct result of the direct experience is to engage with the forces that create and uphold life. Real experience, real movement, real results in, well, the real world. Maybe not sweeping, dramatic changes, or maybe so. Maybe only evident to us. Maybe our own actions, pretty humble stuff, but transcendent nonetheless. As you may know, we UUs are pretty good talkers, definers, what-ifers, and really good questioners. Regarding that UU propensity for questioning most anything, I'm quite surprised that we got through May's whole month of presentations on mystery without a single reference to the old UU joke about asking so many questions. And it's funny where a joke can take you. It seems there was a small community, somewhat conservative, where the townspeople became very unhappy about the presence of a UU fellowship that kept questioning and questioning all sorts of time-honored traditions and social traditions and religious aspects. Fed up, the townspeople went to the UU hall one night and burned a question mark on their front lawn. Ha ha ha. I'm taking a long pause now, and I'm kind of hoping someone who's watching and listening knows why I might be pausing. Transcendence is sometimes big and earth-shaking and ethereal, and other times a smaller personal jolt of discomfort is the beginning of that direct experience. And as I finished writing this joke the other night, I felt really off-center and tense. And I wasn't sure why. I just sat with it for a few minutes to see what might present itself. Thought about the dumb joke. Thought about what's going on in America right now. And it turns out that my discomfort was sort of an invitation to a small personal transcendence. That joke, that simple little silly joke, is actually a teasing, flippant, direct reference to the KKK terror practices that have been part and parcel of cultural and systemic racism in the US for a very long time. Now, I told myself that's not how I meant it, of course, but it's sure as hell how millions of people would hear it and feel it. I talk and I think, and we as UUs talk and think a lot about the implications and impact of our privilege. And talking and thinking is a poor fix for a casually tossed off joke that trivializes the history and the present pain and anger of those who remain outside of that space of privilege. And that's important to me. A lot more important now than it was even a few days ago. And I'm working on it. So to those of you who were not happy with the joke, thank you for that. And I'm sorry. And good for you. My and perhaps our direct experience right now, hopefully, is about transcendence that moves us to a renewal of spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. And for me, thinking and talking about this right now is good, but uncomfortable, as it should be. It's different for different people at different times, and life goes on. But please, if all of this about a dumb joke isn't a big deal to you, that's okay too. Just don't tell me that it's not a big deal to me. Thanks. Phew. Sometimes transcendence isn't warm and fuzzy, especially at first. So before the unexpected last-minute invitation to transcendent potential of a simple joke, I had planned quite a different account of transcendence from a long time ago. Sitting with friends, halfway up into the bleachers at a big music venue just before the show began, I was doing one of my favorite things, people watching. It was a great day. I wasn't working. I was relaxed and happy to be there. It was a friendly and apparently good-natured crowd of people, big crowd. And I recognized a young man down in the floor seating area. He was just leaned back, looking around, pretty much doing what I was doing. Didn't really think about his name or how I knew him, just a quick recognition. He wasn't looking back at me at all. And I continued gazing around the huge room and recognized a girl who was listening to another girl, nodding attentively, not speaking much, really tuning in to what the other person was saying. I felt, been there, me too. By the time I recognized the next 3 or 4 people I looked at, it dawned on me that there was more to this experience. My sense of what was happening was that it was not just recognizing and identifying with each person that I saw, none of whom I had actually ever met. My sense, clearly, calmly, matter-of-factly, was that I was them, and they were me. And for several minutes, I just let that roll, not using these words or any words, but just being those people and their being me, or more precisely, being one with them. The words are difficult. The words don't capture that experience. It was all happening non-verbally, pre-verbally, spontaneously. And it continued for a few minutes. It was incredible. And then the lights dimmed, and the noise increased, and the music started. And we were back to being our, quote, normal, separate selves. And that was okay too. Partly okay because that sense of oneness remained comfortingly in the background, with really no either or about the truth or the mechanics of the experience. And although that same transcendent experience has never happened exactly in the same way again, the truth of that oneness has remained with me, or more accurately, has remained available to me since then. I forget. I spend most of my time seeing people as normally separate. But my worldview, when I don't stray too far to the side of otherness, is consistently informed by that sense of, I see you, meaning the goodness in me greets the goodness in you, and we are one. For this last few minutes, I'll touch on some considerations and mostly some questions, being a UU after all. Some of these I expect will come up this month with other presentations. What makes a transcendent experience happen? I love to wonder about that. And I mean wonder in two senses. One is wondering, just kind of asking myself why. The other sense is wondering with a sense of wonder. And the why, and the what, and the how, for me is less important than that it just is. And I don't think it's either or. I think our linear thought and our transcendent capacity and experience can exist at their best as a harmonious balance. I also think, unfortunately, that balance is most often tipped toward the side of linear, rational, deliberative approach. Who or what invites us to transcendence? I do have a sense that there is an invitation. There is, if you will, a knock on the door, or just kind of waving and wondering if you'd like to engage. So who does that? Who invites us? Is it the goodness and our godness within? Is it just resonance? Is it the soul? Is it circumstance and situation? Sure. That all sounds about right. What gets in the way of transcendence? I mentioned briefly about the balance. The invitation is not insistent. I think it's an opportunity. I think it's there partly around us and partly within us, and both, if we truly accept that we are all part of existence together. I think what gets in the way is us. Kind of insisting that we operate on that rational, logical level. And I think about whether the boundaries and the borders between us and transcendence are useful in some ways. And I think that's part of the balance. I'm not sure that being deeply immersed in a moving, transcendent experience would be the best space to be if I was working on a motor or climbing a ladder, or I think we have both capacities, and I think we overemphasize one and de-emphasize the other. All great questions. We'll have more, I promise. It's going to be a good month. And it's fun. What I'd like to do now is have a closing hymn. We'll do an offering and blessing, and then I'll leave you with some closing words, and hopefully we can have some discussion. So I'm holding this actual and virtual basket. Let this be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are the keepers of the dream. I'll mention also again that there is a link to donate online, and we really appreciate that because our expenses continue even as we don't have many people in the building. I'm going to leave you, other than discussion, with Parker Palmer's book, A Hidden Wholeness, which I would recommend. The subtitle is The Journey Toward an Undivided Life, Welcoming the Soul and Weaving Community in a Wounded World. Really, his writing is really interesting and compelling. And this poem, it came from a discussion with some groups that he was doing on the seed of the true self. And the poem is Love After Love by Derek Wolcott. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you have sometimes ignored. Give this back to another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. And let's see, we need to leave the chalice going. Anything else we need to do before discussion?
I think we're ready for discussion.
Okay, would love to hear from people.
Victor says, I like the idea of transcendence as human connection. Hold on 1 second. I like the idea of transcendence as human connection. I think there is a tie-in to a previous theme of letting go.
I like that too. Yeah, thanks, Victor. That's boy, there are just so many great connections of all kinds in that thought, and I agree that that's all important. It's that odd balance, I think, between letting go and letting go mindfully. It's one of those great, sometimes elusive balances, I think. Thanks, Victor. I really enjoy that.
Something that had struck me during your talk, Cal, was that transcendent experiences aren't necessarily brought about by mindful experiences.
Mm.
So that maybe we could draw one of these, 4-quadrant negative and positive, and then have a corner of transcendent experiences that are positive and mindful, and a quadrant of transcendent experiences that are negative, that are not mindful. And I think that maybe Victor's point connects to that too, this idea that if you're letting go, maybe he's kind of, connecting that to attachment, or to the sort of, self-centered nature that is easy to develop in our world, in our times, that letting go of that and transcending by those means is very nourishing to the soul and to the spirit. And I was really thinking about ways in which people throughout history have had transcendent experiences that only served to reinforce their self-centered notions of, ego, or entrenched them more deeply into perspectives of fear and hatred. And yet those beliefs and those positions that they're holding on to were only strengthened by a transcendent experience of, losing themselves in the mob.
Yeah. I really like that, and that's one of the reasons that I'm so happy that our first principle references where that transcendent experience takes us. Not just one way to put that, and I thought about this with my previously planned example of a transcendent experience in that crowd of people. It's not just about exhilaration or being on a high of any kind. And I almost mentioned when I was talking about that particular experience didn't involve any chemicals, but didn't feel the need to mention that. But it's a good point, because I've experienced what could be categorized as a transcendent experience that was not based or did not result in what I now see as a good outcome. So I think there's a balance with that too.
Okay, some more comments for discussion. Chris Corfantes says, I love how you found transcendence and interconnection through observing people in conversation with each other. She says she's had transcendent experiences mostly through the natural world, like the outdoors. And she hopes to find that connection how you described. And she's mentioning that maybe this realization that people are part of the natural world is kind of beautiful. So that's.
Well, yeah, thanks for that, Chris, because I think that's the case, and it's so easy to forget. We kind of other the natural world, quote unquote, as well as other people, and I think it's easy for me, for sure, and I don't think I'm the only one that we are that. But it's easy to see that as the pristine wilderness, mountains, animals, and miss that word. Whether we see it, whether we own it or not, we're part of that. For better or for worse. Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Janelle Gray says, I had a moment of transcendence. I happened to take a picture of Ben at that time. He was about 2. It was an unremarkable picture other than Ben being cute, but it brings back that moment a little bit.
Boy, that really hits me too. There's something about parenting, I think, that can invite us into all kinds of transcendent experiences, and I don't think there's anything quite like that. That's a great example. Just it's Janelle, thank you. I'm just getting this flood of memories about, like, Daniel explaining to me before he was enculturated enough to know that it wasn't real, describing his imaginary friend to me in great detail and really enjoying the fact that they were friends. And I was lucky enough to be in a space where I just engaged in the conversation, didn't feel the need to talk at all about the realness or not realness of imaginary friends. And, that's just as clear to me today as it was then. Driving down the road, having this conversation with me at the wheel and him in his car seat. Yeah, thanks, Janelle.
Bruce Andrews says, in a very real sense, there's an aspect of letting go in transcendence. Letting go allows you to move to a better place. If you hang on, you can't move.
I agree. And that's such an easy balance for us, right? I mean, we're all really good at that balance. I mean, oh geez, why do we hang on? Our reasons for hanging on,
we can always find reasons,
are so endless. And our odd interpretations of letting go can be kind of endless as well. It's just, there's so much there, and it's odd that letting go can even be a negative, but that it depends on what it means to you. I mean, there's a respect and a gentleness about letting go. It's not a good thing. Well, sometimes it is. I was thinking it's not a good thing if you happen to be a climber, but sometimes you have to, because it's the only way to get to the next the next place you need to be. But we're just, gosh, we don't do a good job, I think, as a society with that balance. When do I hold on? When do I let go? How do I know that? When do we talk about that? Thanks, Bruce.
I think we're good. Feel free to continue a wonderful discussion in the Zoom meeting if you have the chance to join that.
Thank you very much for your comments, and I really enjoyed that, and really appreciate the acknowledgement that I may not be the only one who might have experienced a transcendent experience. For some reason, I'm stumbling on that word. What does that mean? Which was, and the invitation was the fact that I messed up, and I think that's good. And I really resist it, so I'm working on that too. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Hope you can chime in on the Zoom meeting. And where is that? We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. This we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And that will be a good day.
One last announcement. If you didn't see it in the chat, Chris Corfonta mentioned Better Angels, Braver Angels meeting. No, what did she say? She said the Wyoming, Montana Braver Angels leaders are going to do a pilot for depolarization within, and the workshop is on June 16th. And so since it's a pilot, it'll be open to members, and membership is only $12 a year. This workshop helps us work to start within ourselves to heal the nation. And the workshop is online via Zoom. And I'm sure if you reach out to Chris, you can find more information on that. Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you for, I think you're the first person I talked to about that group, and I've really enjoyed the little bit that I've been able to investigate that further. I think it's really a worthwhile program. Thank you.
All right, bye, everybody.